Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 6 of the KITHYM Art How-To Series, where we draw fan art of the D&D Monsters and learn a few tricks along the way. In the previous episode, the CHWINGA had us covering how to render various elemental textures such as fire, water, air, stone, and grass. Well, for this episode we're going to focus on drawing another type of texture, in the Cloud Giant Child. Cloud Giants are a subrace of the Jotun, an entity based in Norse mythology, and consider themselves the most highest of lineage. Cloud Giants boast a 4-time size comparison to most humanoids, meaning a fully grown Cloud Giant can stand up to 24 feet tall. The Cloud Giants are fond of the valuable gems, jewelry, and all manner of decor that speaks to their high nature. The Cloud Giant Child is but a growing creature in both ego and stature, standing around 12 feet tall. In my reference picture, we have plenty of clouds to work with. So let's get to it. So I'm going to go ahead and start by blocking out the character in his pose, and then doing a bit of the detail in the background. So being that this is a child type creature, we're going to use smaller proportions, where the head looks a bit bigger in relation to it. So again, starting with the circle and cross technique. And then do another one for where the chest would be. And another one where the hips would be. And in my reference picture, this creature is sitting crisscross in a sort of a meditation pose, so we're going to go ahead and do that as well. I'm just roughly putting where the back of the feet would be, just to have that idea for myself. And go ahead and block out where my shoulders would be. And again, as I spoke of in the last episode, the elbow meets roughly where the waist is, so we're going to do that here too. Now, I know in my reference picture I have him where he's in a meditation pose and both arms are roughly close to the chest, but I'm going to try something a bit different here, being that it's a child type creature. I'm going to have him looking slightly upwards, and I'm going to go ahead and raise his arm a bit on this side so it looks more like he's engaged with whatever object he's holding, possibly a gem or something. So you see this sense of childlike wonder here in this gem that he's holding. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and draw the platform that he's on, which is going to be a bit of a cylinder shape. And sometimes you might find it helpful to block out the entire shape just very faintly to get an idea of where this shape is going to be in terms of depth. We can see here that since my feet are back here, we want this to be a bit wider across the top, just to fit everything in. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and block out some of that cloud texture that was there too, just to know where the biggest shapes are going to be for it. Just staying really loose here to begin with. Okay. Now from this point on, I'm going to go ahead and block things out a bit more and time lapse, and we'll talk again when we're finished. Okay, so now we can kind of see the character that we're working with here, and don't really think there's much to say here other than for the hands that I was doing the technique, we're just doing one finger at a time, just very lightly, to figure out where this hand is going to be when we're finished here, as well as this other one just to get the impression that it's gripping something. Now you might have noticed that I didn't draw all the fingers on the hand that's holding something, and that's something you could do as well to give the impression that they're carrying something. You don't need to draw every single finger if they're going to be obscured by the object in question. As well as when I drew the nose here, I kind of drew, to begin with, like a small upwards half moon, I guess you could call it. And then from there I drew the bridge of the nose. And for me, that's the technique that I use when drawing character noses, just because I feel as if that gives the general impression of the nose, and then from there you can just expand upon it and then do more details. Same thing for the eyelids. That gives me a good reference point on where the eyebrows are going to be. And for a child figure, the ear is going to look relatively large compared to the rest of the face, and the face is going to be more rounded to begin with, and the neck is going to be a bit thinner. So this is what gives it a bit of a youthful appearance here. And now moving on, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up just a little bit so we can start putting some detail around it. Okay, and now that things are a bit more cleaned up, I do want to point out that my pencils, even though on the camera it seems a bit darker, it actually is a lot lighter than what I'm currently drawing it at. And again, I like to stay in this light pencil stroke kind of stage up until I do the final details, in case I want to erase anything or move things around. It's a lot easier to work with the lighter lines. So from this point moving onwards, I think the bulk of this video is going to be in detailing the cloud texture, so there's not too much of note on this character itself in terms of clothes, other than just some really flowing outfits. And again, if you want to have some really great, I guess, resource pictures to use for drawing cloud type creatures, there's an anime called Hoseki no Kuni, which they have these creatures that are called lunarians that arrive on sunspots, and the sunspots are kind of very similar to what we're doing here, where they look like they're riding on these giant cloud platforms. And overall, it's a gorgeous anime. I just thought I should mention it because it's something that gave me the inspiration to kind of draw this the way I'm going to draw it. So we're going to go ahead and time lapse a bit and do some detail. Okay, coming back for just a moment, I want to point out something here that I just did for the top of this creature's head. So, when drawing the head, to begin with, we do that circle and cross technique, and depending on the length of the hair you're going to have, it's always best to leave a bit of space up top for the volume of the hair, as well as before you even start drawing hair, to know where your hairline's going to be. So being that this child creature is looking upwards, the hairline's going to be slightly higher, but also I just drew it very faintly, and it's probably for the most part going to be entirely covered by whatever detail comes next. But being that I know where the hairline is and the top of the head is, I can do some really cool techniques coming right off the top of it. So that, as well as I just gave a vague outline of where these clots are going to be, but when dealing with the longer flowing fabrics, we're going to give a lot more room for creases and wrinkles, so we want to be able to give ourselves that space in, I guess, following where the biggest flows are going to go, and it's going to come out looking really great. So I'm going to go ahead and time lapse once again, and we're going to work on the hair right afterwards. Alright, so taking a step back, I do want to point out something I mentioned in an earlier video is tangents, which are places where a bunch of lines meet together and it kind of muddies up the drawing just a little bit. So I'll go ahead and point out where a potential tangent was right here, where the hair would have met the thumb as well as the gem, as well as right here where a couple fingers meet this collar jewelry piece that we have here. So again, just being aware of where these lines might start to converge and cause a bit of a mess, to work around them and be prepared to kind of direct those lines elsewhere, just to break up the scene a bit more in those portions. But this is also something that is important about being very light on your line work to begin with. That way you allow yourself the ability to not commit to something when you start adding more details in the scene that might conflict. So that's why I never, or I seldom will outline things before I'm even at the point where everything else is entirely blocked out, so I'm ready to start doing so. Now for the hair, this is something that I really like. I really enjoy doing cloud textures and wind textures. For the most part, it's good to have a sense of direction in the scene, to know where everything is flowing. So you might have seen that I have like this cloud right here in the back on the floor that's going in this upward direction, as well as the hair is moving in this upward direction as well. So that's going to be something like, unless you're handling like a complex like whirlwind kind of thing, or maybe some hurricane, your wind is generally going to be moving in one direction, so it's going to be relatively easy to draw things moving in that one direction. So we see even we have the clothes billowing out towards this way, and if we really wanted to add more impact to the scene, we can extend the clothes to go out that way as well. But then again, it's nice to have these down moments here to kind of break up the overall flow of the scene. Otherwise everything looks like it's just kind of like, you know, pushing across one direction. So for drawing clouds, in my opinion, I like to work with the shape where the wind is coming from. I like to do more rounded edges to it, just to get like that billowing type of thing, where it's all the clouds are collecting back here in the more heavier, denser parts of where the hair would be. And then I'll do that wave motion that I do with the fire technique as well, and kind of alternate where my lines are moving, and at least try to break it up in equal proportions on each part. And then finally getting to where the edge of the cloud would be, that's when I start doing my sharper shapes, where I have the tips of it here just completely breaking into these really sharp, steep lines. And I think that gives the impression of like a cloud that's jutting across. So we're going to go ahead and do that for the bottom of the scene as well. But since we're already up here in this area, I do want to add some more details because I'm very excited to draw the hair and jewelry. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that things are a bit more outlined, and we've chosen the lines you want to commit to, let's start with the jewelry. So in my reference picture, I do have some ornate jewelry that was from a statue that's called Bodhisattva on Cloud, which kind of fits our character here. And that's I kind of pieced two of them together, one that has jewelry and one that just has the robes. So with the one with jewelry, we're going to start with the earrings first, and we have our gemstone that's right about here, right where the ear would be. So this one you can't really see it that much, so we're not going to worry about that one. But then also for doing jewelry, this is the place where you want to be very cautious with your lines, because it's very easy to get things mixed up and a bit overlapped here. We don't want to do that. So just really quickly with this nose, something about it. Okay. So for this, I'm going to use, I guess, a semi-light pressure on it, because I don't want to have to go back in there and outline this part. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I get things done the way I want it to right off the bat. But again, I'm going to do this very carefully, just so that way I can have complete line control of what's going on in this area. There we go. So whenever doing jewelry, I prefer to be very cautious with my lines, as so once again, that way I don't have to risk muddying it up again if I have to go over it, or again just getting this detail done right in one place, just because my heavy-handedness usually ends up messing things up if I have to outline these small details once again. So from here, the earpieces don't look too complicated, but it's just that one portion there that I wanted to get done properly. From here it seems to go a bit up and curls in, assuming for here. I'm just going to very lightly outline this. And when choosing which lines to outline, I try to roughly follow the texture in question. So being that this is an earpiece, it's not going to be something that needs like this thick bold outline that we see here on the robes all across the entirety of the earrings. It's just going to be probably not even the outline right here, probably just right here where the outer edge of the character meets. And then from here we can leave it at this thickness just to distinguish that it's there, but it's not going to be something that's going to be so in your face and bold. And again, it keeps us from having to go over it and, as I said before, muddy up some details. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that off right there. And I think that's just perfect where that is right there, so I'm not going to mess with that anymore after this in this part of the scene. So this other earpiece is kind of roughly the same, so we're going to do this very cautiously as well. But luckily it's kind of obscured by the side of this face right here, so we don't have to do too much with it, and we can just leave it at this. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and time lapse a bit, but I'm gonna be doing the same thing and the same kind of carefulness with the waist and the neck jewelry, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, So now that we got the jewelry done, I want to make a quick note about line control. That is definitely something that comes with practice, and it's more about being patient with the scene and being okay with the results that come out. So not everything needs to be perfectly symmetrical. It just has the illusion of being symmetrical, and I can point that out right here. So on this waist belt, we could see that this curl right here seems slightly thicker than this one, as well as this spiral right here is slightly larger than this one. But again, it's just the appearance. Being that these are such a small part of the scene, when taken as an overall piece, you won't even be able to tell that that's what that is. And even this part of the waistband here that's supposed to be, it could be perfectly rounded, but it's kind of wavy. And again, just following the, I guess, your patience when drawing these kind of things, it's good to know that the overall piece itself is definitely gonna, reward you for the patience that you put into it. And one more thing, again, about tangents. So you might have noticed that I entirely avoided this area of space right between the fingers and hand. And again, I kind of filled the detail back here more because this is where the rough outline of the hand is going to be, and down here just to give more breathing room to this heavily complex part of the scene. I didn't even draw the detail right there. So little techniques like that, that even from a distance it still looks as if it's ornate jewelry, but it also kind of gives you the breathing room and space to not cluster things so close together. And that's a really valuable technique to have when inking a drawing, because that's going to be something that you want to have, that bit of space there just to give your pen work more space to flow. And that is something that I actually did pick up from doing pen outlines. So perhaps maybe try different tools every once in a while to see what you can learn from just drawing different techniques in different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and outline the rest of this rope here, and then we're going to do the gem, and finally we're going to get to the cloud textures of the hair and the bottom of the scene. So okay, just a quick moment. I want to point out that you might have noticed that I drew the clouds before I started doing the detail on the base of this platform, and that's again something that knowing where your detail is going to be overlapping, you definitely want to get rid of those first. So the foreground, what's most in front, is this cloud, and then further back is the platform. So we want to make sure we do the cloud first, that way we don't do all the detail here and have to spend extra time erasing everything, because we realize our cloud's going to be covering most of it. So now we're going to go back into doing some clouds. So for clouds, you might have noticed that I'm definitely not as careful as I was for the jewelry pieces, and again, that's because clouds are so billowy and fluffy that straight lines don't often work for them. So I don't allow myself to be too confined to outlining things, I guess you could say, properly when it comes to doing clouds, or even, I guess, wind or smoke. It's something that I allow the freedom of the cloud to show through in the messiness of the lines. And again, taken as a whole, from a distance this looks really great. So don't be afraid to let your lines get a bit messy when you're drawing air, smoke, and clouds, but try to keep somewhat close to your target. That way it looks more like a double outline than just simple messiness. Okay. And now from here, we're just going to do what our reference picture has, which is these kind of rolling cloud effects. And we're just going to go ahead and follow some of these curls and then just allow it to roll towards where this piece is moving. And by that I mean like right here I have this line coming from the middle of this one, kind of flips over where this curve is going, and then now there's another one that's sort of layered atop of it. It has its own sense of general direction, and then another one that's layered atop of it. I kind of like to imagine that if I were to be coloring this scene afterwards, and again this is just alternating the medium in which you draw and allows you to see these things in different ways, but if I was to be coloring this piece immediately afterwards, I would know, let's say if I were to do some sort of multicolor, red would go in this space here, blue would go in this space here, maybe purple in this space here, and like, you know, yellow or something. But again, like none of this ever overlaps to the point where I'm drawing red and all of a sudden now I'm in the blue side. So I kind of like have this sectioned off like that, and it gives the appearance of like a rolling cloud, or at least textures that are layered in the sense that it's a bit easier to know what's going on, as well as it gives the impression that this cloud is much more lively than just a gust of wind. So we're going to do that just a bit more for the rest of these. Okay. So another tip that I was just thinking about when I was looking at my reference picture here, again, just the joys of different mediums art that teach you different techniques. At first, a lot of textures seem impossible to kind of render in pencil, and to me, like, it seems that way at first when I'm dealing with stuff like smoke especially, and like say mist. But the thing is that there's usually been a masterful artist who in the past has been able to recreate such a thing in marble stone, or again with just regular paint. So looking at these things, these portraits and different art pieces, you can kind of see how they did it and what techniques they did and how they reduced certain shapes into things that the eye and the brain is able to pick up as, hey, this is smoke, hey, this is water. And again, statues, most especially when they do sculptures of water or smoke, is just astounding to me, because it shows that you really can just reduce these things into the smallest of forms and shapes. And again, that's something that you can translate very well into drawing, because it's already been translated into a still picture where the most important contours are right in front of you. So we're almost finished with this piece. All I have left is to do the halo behind him and the gem and the hair. So I'm going to go ahead and time-lapse a bit of that, and we'll talk as soon as we're finished up with that. Okay. And now I'm just going to do a very quick background with the clouds that we already have in our reference picture, just to kind of give a bit more depth to the scene. But I'm going to do that as we're talking. So one thing I enjoy about drawing clouds is it does give me the ability to have this freedom from being so attached to these heavy outlines or traditional things that your art is supposed to do, so to speak. Being able to draw these freeing shapes is a very fun technique to do. So as a challenge to yourself, one thing you can do is to look at a bunch of reference pictures, look at a bunch of sculptures, and to get the texture down and to figure out how these people rendered it, how they drew it, how they colored it, how they painted it, etc., etc. And it's definitely a way to kind of learn some tricks for yourself as well as for your art, to understand how these people did these things, and to remind yourself that it is doable. It's not impossible. Nothing is ever impossible to draw, at least not for long. So again, I'm just going to close up the rest of these clouds in the scene. And again, this is all just following the same general idea of what I did for the hair, where it's all going one direction, there's rounds in other directions, and it shoots out in various ways. So, one last thing. For the gem in the hand, this is something that we're most likely going to cover with a different creature later on. I can almost sense it. But for the time being, when rendering jewels and gems, it's something that you definitely want to keep as many straight lines as possible, depending on like if your gem is going to be something that's cut, or if it's going to be just like a regular raw gem, then you definitely want to still use these hard edges. But most definitely you want to keep your streaks and your shading to a minimum and very controlled to know like which way they're going. So if this does not look entirely like a gem, it at least looks like a shiny object, and that's most especially because of these little star highlights that we have coming off of it. So that's a trick for next time. But here you have it. Creature number 6, challenge rank 0, Cloud Giant Child. Hope you learned a lot from this video. I had a lot of fun drawing this one. Stay tuned for next time. Like, subscribe, follow, and as always, keep practicing.